Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining tonight's Meet the Mentor event. As you know, this series is intended for the cohort to get to know each other a little better and for mentors to share their knowledge and expertise with everyone, not just their own mentee. Tonight, we will be hearing from Naomi Kraus, who is a leader in UX, editorial, and product design, a Rutgers alumna, and has been a mentor in the Allison R. Bernstein Media Mentoring Program since 2017. Naomi has a wide range of experiences, including editing publications for the American Kennel Club, working on maps and search at Google, and founding Veracitas Group, a consulting practice for AI adoption. Please join me in welcoming Naomi, and let's get this conversation started. If you have any questions as you hear her speak, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I just want to kick tonight off. I gave a brief introduction of you, but can you like share a little bit about your professional journey and your time at Rutgers, your first job, and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely, I can totally do that. But before I do, I just wanted to ask one question from everybody because I know I can't see everyone. And especially once I start, I have a small deck of slides. And once that happens, I start losing sight of everyone inside the room in the chat. Um, how many of you are actually using AI in your jobs, your personal life, etc.? And if you are, do you consider yourself a beginner? Or is it more for personal, at work, etc.? Feel free to just stick it in the chat just so that I have a general idea of who I'm talking to. Don't be shy. Occasionally, definitely beginner. Okay, beginner, both for school and work. Awesome. Okay, intermediate. Just started using for travel. I use it all the time for writing and thinking. Great. And therapy. No, no, no. Okay, well, I'll tell you why you should not do that. Okay, beginner. Yeah, mostly for proofreading, beginner and using in classes. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Um, Here we go. Okay. Uh, I apologize for the minor technical issues. Apparently, Zoom does not like Chrome, which was kind of hilarious. Uh, Okay, just to start off, um, I arrived at Rutgers way back when in 1990, very, very long time ago. Believe it or not, I was actually a bio-sci major when I started at Rutgers. I came for the pre-med program. Rutgers chemistry murdered me. That was the end of that. And I still remember this. I was sitting in the middle of a class at Lurie or Hickman. It was one of the two. I don't remember which one. And it was a women's social history class of some kind. And I was like, I am not going through this class. And for those of you who are now digitally oriented, back then you actually had to physically add drop your classes when you started them. I know, very old school. And I remember took out my course catalog and I'm like, I'm not taking this class. What else is there? And there was a class, and I believe it was mass communication or something to that effect downstairs. And it was being taught by a professor named Steve Miller. And I walked downstairs and he was lecturing on the evils of cable TV. And this was me, right on. And I walked up to him and I was like, can I have an over tally? And he's like, yeah, sure. And that was the start of my media and communications career. I'd written for my high school paper, but to be honest with you, for me, and even then, it was still kind of fun. By the way, he had dark hair back then, for those of you who still had him now. I can attest to that fact. And then I ended up writing for the Daily Targum. I was a sports reporter. I covered all the sports that nobody else wanted to cover. I did fencing, diving, swimming, tennis, all that kind of fun stuff. I actually got named one of the top 5 collegiate tennis writers by Tennis Magazine because of that, which was kind of cool. And I was assaulted by many, many ducks at Passion Puddle while walking past Douglas. And Nishi has told me that those ducks are still there. Watch out for them, they're evil. And when I graduated from Rutgers, I graduated with a journalism degree and a history degree. Fun fact, I always managed to graduate into a recession. So it was actually extraordinarily hard to get a job. And I did a couple of odd jobs here and there. I was a substitute teacher for a while. Actually, I taught history for a bit. I got a travel agent's license, which actually came in handy later. So I helped plan travel. And I applied to graduate school. And I got into Columbia's J School. And there, I have to say, it was a really 1 year intensive experience. And I got to learn from some of the absolute greats. Floyd Abrams taught me First Amendment law, which was amazing. Ray Cave, who's the former managing editor of Time, and Pat Ryan, who's the former managing editor of People, were my magazine professors. And my intro to reporting professor was E.R. Shipp. I still remember that. She was a Daily News columnist, and she won the Pulitzer the year she was my professor. So that was pretty good. And Judith Crist, the famed movie critic, actually taught me personal and professional style and criticism. So I got my red pen pretty hard way, but it was actually a really interesting experience. I ended up writing my master's thesis on hospital billing, of all things. By the way, they still have not solved healthcare. You see the same problems, I think, that I wrote my master's thesis to this day. And I got a course in something called Basic HTML. They had just started digital journalism. So that should tell you where the profession was actually starting. And this was 1996. Oh, and by the way, it snowed a lot. So my brother actually just called me about the blizzard, strangely enough, and he's like, it's the curse of the year of 90 that ends in 6, and he happens to be correct. I looked up the data, just so you know. 1996, 2006, 2016, and 2026. Wait for 2036, and it'll prove a pattern. And then I graduated from J School, and again, graduated into an era in which print journalism was not doing so well. Everybody, by the way, who was more of a digital media, because it had just started, got jobs, but then they got laid off like almost 9 months later because everyone had been overhired. But I actually started off at the American Kennel Club, strangely enough, which turned out to be an amazing first job because a small publication or even a small operation, they ask you to do everything. And so I was doing back of the book and front of the book. And I even have, I dug it up. This is literally, I don't know if you can see it, volume 1, issue 1 of a magazine. I launched a magazine while I was there. So for the AKC. Which was really, really cool. And it was also an initial foray into digital first products because we were actually starting their website. Here's another little thing and this will probably resonate with those of you who are a bit older. Until just now, this is my most recent job hunt, I got all of my jobs through the New York Times want ads. You would peruse the Sunday Times and they'd have all of the jobs that were available, and you would get really nice resume paper and you would hunt down the people that you needed to talk to and write cover letters, and that's how you get your jobs. I applied to Frommer's Travel Guides, and I got in because, one, I had that travel agent's license. Your life skills always come in handy. You would be surprised, even your hobbies and assorted other things. And I had also worked on a map for Westminster Dog Show while I was at the AKC, and that was a skill that turned out to be great. The other skill that also helped was I had learned some basic layout and design skills as well, and that also came in handy. So technical skills of certain kinds, everything that you pick up along the way, you'd be surprised at what's going to come in handy later in life. And again, it was a really interesting initial foray into digital first products and content architecture management systems. That was actually my first introduction to a taxonomy and into a content management system, because we actually had to put things inside. And that would be a skill set that would serve me well when I moved into Google later on. Plus, I got to stay in really cool hotel rooms. And I got to travel all over the world in a lot of interesting places. I did become the queen of artificial destinations, however. That's literally what they called me when I was at Frommer's, because I covered Disney World, Las Vegas, cruising, you name it. If it was artificial, I was there. I'm not a snob when it comes to travel. I was just like, yeah, I'm totally down with that. And then there was the first wave, I would say, of what I would call um, almost media merging. And a lot of media companies started swallowing a lot of other media companies. And Google bought Frommer's. I was literally sitting inside a dentist's chair when this happened. Imagine those old Nokia phones, not the smartphones, people. We're talking about the old stuff. And I get a message from my boss that says, Google has bought Frommer's. Your job is, and then the message cuts out. And I was like, and I found out I was safe. But yeah, Google actually bought us, and we were a content and a talent acquisition. They didn't care about the brand. They didn't care about any of those other things. Google wanted us for the content that Frommer's had because they had all the maps and assorted other data, etc. And they wanted to be able to fill things in. And that was my introduction to the fact that companies would swallow you for very specific assets and then literally throw away other things that they didn't want. And how did I know this? Because they turned around and sold the brand back to Arthur Frommer like within a year. They didn't want the Frommer's brand. All they wanted was the access to the data and the content. I started as an editorial manager at Google, and Google was a really interesting experience because there is where, even though I had been ostensibly editing for, I'd say at least 1 million to 2 million people, that was nothing. At Google, you were really designing for people at the billion scale. Google has 7 products that literally reach 1 billion people, and that was kind of like mind blowing. It wasn't at the time when I was there; it hadn't reached yet those heights, but it was definitely getting there. And I designed everything from user interface copy to information architecture, etc. eventually. It was also my first foray into what I will call AI. Now, some of you think AI just happened within the last few years because the buzzwords started. No, my first foray into machine learning and AI probably was about, I'll say about 8 years ago. That's when machine learning really started, because we were already starting to teach algorithms on how to surface information to you when you were searching for it in Google search or on maps, or how to draw information out and how to tag data and associate data so that we could surface better search results for you. That was ultimately what we were going to do. And that's also why our titles were morphing. I had no idea what a UX designer was when I started, and yet ultimately I became a user experience designer. People ask me today, what does that mean? And I was just like, I'm your advocate. And someone asked me, like, what do you do at Google? Because to be honest with you, the question that I got the most was, do you work on the Google Doodles? And my answer was just like, no. Although for the record, I did, in point of fact, work on one Google Doodle. I helped design the doodle for Anne Frank's diary 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago. So I did work on one. And I was very proud of that one. But the reality of the situation is I would always tell them, I'm like, think of me as a matchmaker. And I was the person who helped you find the thing that you were searching for. And I was helping you match up with your content. And I was also helping design the screen that you got so that you understood the content when you saw it and helped you find it. But that was an initial foray into AI. Now, I know plenty of you are kind of curious about AI as a whole. AI is a lot of things, and it's used in a lot of places. I think the most popular thing, or the most prevalent, are chatbots, and that would be ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, etc. But the truth is that artificial intelligence is used in data analysis, Some of your organizations may be using that. Automated stories. Google, for example, I know services a lot of journalism companies in doing that as well. In search algorithms, it helps surface information. In media streaming as well, it actually operates that. In production, if you've used Canva and you've used Magic Eraser, you've used AI for content curation and for grouping things, etc. I think Sharon's here for yes, there she is. Okay, I can source. So a lot of pharmaceutical companies actually use AI to group just molecules, et cetera, and so forth, and try and group those content. For facial recognition, just yesterday, I was reading a story, for example, that there's a security company, and it's not just facial, it's for all types of recognition. There's a company that's helping law enforcement agencies screen license plates so that cops know how to pull over wanted license plates. So imagine like you have an Amber Alert, it can actually alert a police officer. Text editors. That's also another one that a lot of people are aware of. You can actually put in text. Grammarly, for example, is a good example. And for social media feeds, if you're wondering how those social media feeds know what to feed you, they're using AI. So you have used AI a lot. You just didn't know in some cases that you were using it. Now, I always like to start with the problems first before we get to the fun stuff. There are a lot of known AI problems. But here are four of them that I know would probably apply to some of the people in this audience. One is bias. So bias often occurs in AI systems because of the data used in their training models. And a lot of the data comes from the web. And let's face it, there's a lot of icky stuff on the web. It often reflects societal biases, prejudices, and stereotypes. In addition to my job as a content designer who was actually looking at bias in some of models, et cetera, I was also a global employee resource group chair while I was at Google. And I specifically was asked to look at some of the responses from some of Gemini's models, et cetera, for bias, specifically to look at it. Is there a problem in how it's reporting certain things? Does it leave certain things out in responses? Are responses different for certain types of issues when you ask it about a man or a woman or a certain group? Those are the kinds of things that an AI might learn from a bias problem. And by the way, just remember, a lot of media organizations are using those AIs to obtain information. So those bias might be feeding into your group and to the news that's being reported. Hallucinations. This one I think is a much more popular one because a lot of people hear that. LLMs do go off the rails. Everybody knows when they go completely psycho. That one's easy. The problem is that they'll spew false information with such confidence and it'll sound so good that you'll be like, oh, this must be true. I will give you a perfect example. I publish articles on Medium. I was going back and forth with some of my AI minions. I will tell you about that later. And four of them told me to apply to a publication that did not exist. And it used to exist, but it no longer existed. But they all of them told me. And I had to go, and I, by the way, am very much in the trust but verify camp. And I was just like, I ain't taking their word for it. So I went and looked and it did not exist. So you have to be very careful with the information that you get. I've also attended trainings. There is a well-known Excel trainer called Miss Excel. She runs little training camps for Excel people through Microsoft. She's a certified Microsoft person. I attended one of her classes. She's certified by Microsoft, and she even says you can't trust all the numbers that come back from Excel. So from the AI within Excel, you have to actually verify some of those numbers. So if you're using AI to verify like information and dollar signs, et cetera, in your tax forms, run those numbers through a calculator because the IRS may come and say hi to you. You don't want that to happen. Privacy. This one's a biggie. AI-powered tools can collect and generate lots of personal data, and that can definitely pose a threat to privacy and security. The other issue around this is that you do not have the same legal protections when you utilize anything with AI that you do in a lot of other instances. And a lot of people mistake the fact that, oh, I have this deal with AI and I can totally do things and it knows me and it understands me, and they start telling things to an AI that they absolutely should not be doing. One, absolutely never, ever, ever put in personal financial details or any of those things into an AI. Bad, bad, bad. Do not do that. Because at least I think two of the major ones have already been caught accidentally leaking details out or publishing details to certain things. The other reason is that regardless of the privacy perspectives and all the promises that they're making, that data is still retained for, I believe, up to 30 days. Now, they may promise that they're not going to give it over, but the truth of the matter is it's still there. And in some cases, here's the other issue. If you're dealing with it, especially as an international company, and I don't know if any of you work for international firms, et cetera, and so forth, you may be dealing with privacy laws that are different than your own. And you may accidentally break the law. I will give you a very concrete example of a privacy in an AI issue. Some of you may have heard of note-taking AI software, something like Granola or Otter. I know those are very popular. That's great, except in a whole bunch of states that are not one-party consent states, but they're two-party consent states. If you use that software without getting permission from every single person who's on that call, you have now broken the law, i.e., you've actually committed a crime. So you got to be really careful on the privacy department. It's a known AI problem. And the last one is work slop. And this one is a term you may have heard. If not, you're going to hear it a lot more. And that's the amount of crap content being spun up by AI. Some of you may have seen some of this because AI puts out a lot of this stuff. If you actually ask AI to do things, artificial intelligence and all of these LLMs, they are essentially putting patterns of words together. The reality is some of it may read smoothly. That doesn't mean it reads well. And a lot of it is, shall we say, not the greatest stuff on the planet. It's fine, but it's not wonderful. I was telling Nishi before, here is one of the known hazards. And we discussed this even at Google, and we discussed it among content designers of several companies, which is this. If you put enough work slop on the web, that goes back into the models that train the AIs, which then goes back to you as more work slop. Essentially, you could be, how shall I put this, creating a crap content machine. And it's a perpetual cycle. So you have to be really careful about work slop issues. That's another known hazard with AI. Here are the usual suspects, though, that most people know when it comes to AI. Now, for the record, I use 5 of these and other tools on a daily basis in Veracitus Group, which is my LLC. Most people only use maybe 1 or maybe 2. I've attended seminars where a lot of people say, just use 1, go deep in it, maybe 2. I will tell you that as a content designer, I don't think that's a good idea. And the reason I don't think it's a good idea is because every single one of these has pluses and minuses, which a lot of people don't appreciate. It's almost like reading one newspaper and getting your news in a news bubble, to use a media comparison. Now, ChatGPT, it's the most popular. It's Claude's catching up to it, but it's very popular for good reason. It definitely has some definite faults. It's got serious context problems. If some of you may have used it, and you'll notice that the longer your thread goes, it starts forgetting things, and it also starts making mistakes the longer you have a conversation with it. That's a known problem. The other issue with ChatGPT is it's very self-protective of itself. If you actually say, well, this LLM has said X, Y, and Z, it's going to be like, well, I know better, or etc. You can try this. It's really an interesting experience. The other issue with ChatGPT, which I thought was really fascinating, is, and some of you may have seen this in the news, ChatGPT 4.0 actually had a really nice warm fuzzy personality. Subsequent editions, they've tamped down on that, and it's starting to become very corporate bland, and it's just not as much fun to use anymore. And so it's not as much fun to engage with. And as a user experience person, that's an issue for like from my perspective. Gemini. Too many people still use it as a search substitute. And AI is not a search engine. And I'll go into that a little bit more later, but it's not a search substitute. It's also not 100% accurate. Perfect example, a friend tried to use Gemini last week to actually optimize a delivery route in our neighborhood. And it was totally telling her that streets that were completely far apart from each other were close to each other. And we're talking about an AI that is associated with Google Maps. So when I tell you that it's not 100% accurate, it has its moments. You got to be cautious. Perplexity. This one's not as well known, but I think it's really, really useful for those of you in media and communications. And the reason I think it's really useful is because it actually gives its sourcing and it will tell you where it got its information from. Use it as a check on others. The downside with Perplexity is this is how I would describe it. It doesn't really have a lot of soul. It's kind of dry. And so it's not necessarily the one that I would use for if you're trying to get tips on how to jazz up your own writing or do something of that nature. Claude, best personality of the LLMs by far. It's not even a close race there. And it's also the best at high level strategy. There are some bad utilization issues with Claude. And here's the number one issue, which is, well, there are two issues. One is that Claude caps the number of tokens that you can use in a given session. So you actually do have to kind of wait sometimes midstream and you're just like, wait, you just cut off my access. Why are you doing this to me? It's less of an issue when you're using it on an enterprise level, but even if you're using the pro level, it'll do that. The other issue, and this is fascinating, is its training data is a year behind. Whenever I start a conversation with Claude, I always give it the date and the time, so it actually knows what date and time it is. And by the way, there are plenty of LLMs, just so that you know, that don't know time. You have to tell it. And that's something that most people don't understand. Copilot. It does wonderful world with graphics. It couldn't even compress a 4 MB photo last week. It has some serious technical deficiencies. It can also do horrible things to your computer. If you're using it for work and it's an enterprise level, then you do have Microsoft to help you. But if you're using it for personal, I'm telling you right now, you're taking chances. I did not know that Copilot had some of the technical deficiencies that it had. It almost ate my hard drive. I only found out after the fact. So I'm giving you this own personal warning. Metalama, it's mostly for open source developers because it skews technical, and I got to be honest with you, I hardly ever use it. DeepSeek, you may have heard of it. It's low cost and gets good results, but it's got real security issues because it's China. Never, ever put personal details into DeepSeek, ever. Grok. Okay, so this one's controversial. There are definite guardrail issues with this one. It's the X, obviously the one associated with Elon Musk. I will admit to a definite personal bias against Elon Musk because I worked in the tech industry and very few people like him if they've actually had friends who work in the tech industry. But the bigger issue I have with Grok is that there are definite bias issues inside of their training data, and it comes out when you actually use it. So I don't generally use Grok. I'm going to be 100% honest. But I strongly suggest that you just try them out. They all have free versions and you can try them out. For the record, I tend to use pro level versions because I find them much better, and I obviously am using them for business. Here's the other thing that I would also tell you is, and I can't see you all right now in chat, but if you're using something at work, Don't expect the same level of experience at home. You will not get it. And a lot of people get completely flummoxed when they can't or don't get the same level of experience when they have a different version at home. One, the just the hardware that you're running on is very different. And the guardrails, et cetera, that are in place are very different. I noticed immediately, I'm telling you right now, the Gemini that I used when I was at Google is not the Gemini that I got at home. It's not. And even the difference between pro and free is going to be very different. So you have to be super careful about it. The 3 rules of AI orchestration. And I'm going to use the word orchestration here because I think it's important from this perspective. I use AI to run my business because I can't afford, to be perfectly honest with you, to hire people. I'm a single self-employed person. AI is a tool. It's not a solution. Too often you hear that AI is a solution to a lot of everything. Oh, you don't have this? You can use AI. Oh, you can do this? You can use AI. No, you cannot do that. AI is a tool and you utilize it. It does not utilize you. A lot of people too often are designing to the machine and they're not designing to the user problems that you have. I was also telling Nishi last week, I was at, not last week, a few days ago, I was at a conference and the chief technical officer was talking about developers and how AI was reducing the amount of developer costs, etc. I was sitting in a room of women nonprofit leaders. All they wanted to do was wrangle their donor lists. He did not talk about that at all. That's the solution they needed, but they were sitting there and they're just like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? That is a tool to be used. I view AI as tools and as departments. You are basically assembling a specialized tool set. And that's also the reason that I'm telling you to try different tools and different LLMs. And I'm also going to tell you about different tools. I mean, I can see a couple of you like in the screen. I'm sure a couple of you use Canva or something similar. Yeah. So Canva, by the way, is a lot of Canva is built on AI. For design, it's awesome. There's an amazing AI tool called Reeve, REVE.ai. If you need photography and you want to actually design a photo, it's amazing. I designed a lot of the photography for my website on it. Those are specialized AI tools that you can learn how to use. I'm going to give you all a special tip. There is literally a site called There's an AI for that. Go down the rabbit hole. Have fun with it. You're also going to discover, by the way, how many ridiculous amounts of AI tools are devoted to the same problem and are completely unnecessary. But you can actually just go and peruse all the different kinds of AI tools that are available. And here's the most important thing as a media professional, which is maintain editorial judgment. Ultimately, you are the person who decides what you put out. You are the person who ultimately makes the decision, not the AI. You are in charge. I never, ever yield my judgment to an AI, ever. And I will show you because this is literally a map of how I ran one project within my company. It was me at the middle as the CEO. And these were all, I actually built departments. I built projects within each LLM. And I used different LLMs for different functions. I had an editorial department. Perplexity was fact checking. Claude was editing my text. I had Gemini doing research for me. ChatGPT, by the way, if you ever have to get on an IT support call, go to ChatGPT and have him coach you through it. Amazing. What should have taken me like 10 hours took me only like 20 minutes. He literally told me exactly what I should say to the IT support person. And it got me through the call in like 5 seconds. It was amazing. Production, Canva, Reeve, etc. It helped me put out a product that I ultimately was the arbiter of what was going out, but I could go to my departments and be like, okay, I need to run a cost model. Can you do that for me? Can you do this, etc. You hear the words agentic AI a lot, and I'll go into that a little bit in a second, but The truth is you don't really need agentic AI to do a lot of this stuff. A lot of it, you can actually just ask the LLM to do it for you. When not to use AI. Creative work. Do not outsource your creativity to an AI. One, they are not very creative, to be blunt. One of the worst prompts that I've ever seen is, what would Elon Musk do in this situation? What would Steve Jobs do in this situation? The reason I don't like that prompt, and I actually wrote an article about this, is because one, you are getting the worst of Steve Jobs and the worst of Elon Musk, along with the best of Elon Musk, because the AI cannot tell the difference between the two. Just as an FYI, AIs are not good at context that way, unless you are so specific. The other reason is essentially you are telling the AI that I don't have a better solution than Elon Musk and I don't have a better solution than Steve Jobs, when you might actually be the next Steve Jobs or the next Elon Musk. And we will get no innovation if we do that. Creativity is actually what humans do best. It's not what AIs do best. For time-sensitive work, I don't advise using AI because then you don't have properly time to vet the stuff that comes in. And if it sounds really good, it's really tempting to use what the AI tells you. And if it's wrong, you're in trouble. That happened in that very publicized case, I think, with the lawyer who submitted the brief to the court of a case that didn't exist. Don't be that lawyer. Speaking of lawyers, legally sensitive work. Don't do that. That would be bad. Do not use AI in anything that's legally sensitive. Aside from the fact that you might be liable for what happens, there is no privilege within AI, just so you are aware. So anything that you feed into the AI is open in a case, in a court case, etc. There's no legal privilege assigned to any legal experience within AI. Privacy-related data, same issue that I reviewed before. And again, to sub for your own judgment. Don't do that. One of the things in another article I wrote, I was sitting at a table with a student and they were telling me how they do their work. And he told me he writes his work and then he tells the AI to polish it. And I was just like, no, you're not doing that right. And he's like, what? I'm like, you're not learning. You're subbing it for your own judgment. I was like, what you should be asking the AI is, what can I do to make it better? That's how you should be utilizing AI. You make the judgment call. The AI can tell you what it thinks you might do better. The reason I say that on top of everything else is Perplexity, for example, has told me to change some of my text, and I've rejected that advice. Why? Because I want my voice to be strong. I want my opinion to be strong. And it's actually tried to make it less so. Now, as far as agentic AI, one, I've actually written a guide to agentic AI. It's actually aimed at small business owners, but if you're really interested, this does explain what agentic AI is. And for everyone who's here, as a gift to the entire mentorship community, if you email me, I will send it to you. Nothing. It's a free gift for everybody. And it explains what agentic AI is and whether you actually need it. It's just iwl@veracitusgroup.com. Most of you don't need agentic AI, by the way. Agentic AI, basically, just to give you 5 seconds worth of what it actually is agentic AI is when you give the AI a goal and it goes off and does it by itself. But you're giving the AI a whole lot of control. I literally had a CTO for a company tell me that they will not allow, for example, you may have heard of Claude Work or Claude Code, etc. They won't allow that because you have to actually allow direct access to your systems. So you're taking a risk when you do this. It's agentic AI, by the way, with Copilot that sank my hard drive. So that was my first foray into agentic AI. I learned a lot of lessons with that one. So it does come with a lot of caveats that in many cases the media kind of brushes over. I actually tell a lot of business owners you don't need it. Agents are good for some stuff, and internal agents for some companies where tech support has vetted them. That's great for small things, but large scale usage, can definitely come with some downsides. Let's just put it that way. But if you actually want more of a, here's what it is and some sources about where you can learn more for it, I am more than happy to send it to everybody. And I'm also happy to take questions or anything from anybody. So let me stop sharing so I can actually see everybody. And Nishi, you're muted, but if anybody has anything I can't tell or
There was a question in the chat earlier. Lisa asked, how are the paid versions of Perplexity and Claude better than the free versions?
okay, so the paid versions are, so I've never used the free version of Perplexity. I'm gonna be upfront with that one because I got a free subscription, so I can't tell you how it differs from the free one. The paid version for Claude is different in that you get more tokens. What are tokens? Tokens are essentially bits of information that you get to extract from the AI. So you get more time with it, and you get more time to basically interact with the experience before it resets. You also get access to more models or different types of thinking. You might have noticed, for example, it might be more extended thinking, or etc. You might get a better response, or you might get a deeper response from the model. With the pro version also, I do believe that there are different tiers of, are there different tiers of privacy? I'd have to take a look. I'm not sure. But I do know, now remember, I'm talking about pro version. When you're talking, there's a big difference, and I just want to actually also make this comparison. There's free, there's pro, and then there's enterprise. Enterprise is a company. That's a whole different universe. Because I think, Sharon, when you were talking about using AI at work, you probably have an enterprise version. I had an enterprise version. That is a whole different story. Those have seriously strict security protocols. Those have dedicated IT teams. You're going to have a whole different universe. The pro versions are what I would call a much, 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 much better version of the free version, as opposed to an enterprise version. You, from a safety perspective, I don't know if they're that much safer per se. And here's the other thing on the safety thing, because I still talk to Google engineers, etc. The reality is, right now we've all heard about like hackings, etc., and so forth. The idea that black hats aren't going after the AIs is ridiculous. They are. Sooner or later, somebody's going to hack one of them. It's already, the attempts have already started. So that's another concern. There hasn't been a full-scale breach to my knowledge. But the idea, there was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. There was a report of one of them was trying to mine their own cryptocurrency or something. Maybe it was last week. One was trying to mine its own cryptocurrency. Um, the idea that something weird is not going to happen is just wrong-headed. It's going to happen sooner or later. You know,
Um, thank you.
any
Sharon,
other,
do you have a question?
I
Sorry.
do. So first, thank you. This has been really great, informative, a little scary.
I don't want to be scary because here's the thing. I literally run my business with AI. I am not an AI doomsayer, and I don't want to be an AI doomsayer. I just want everyone to be an educated AI user.
Yeah. So to that point, what is the best way for us to stay updated and informed as not as super technical people, but lay people? Is there a bunch of
Yeah,
news?
so
Or,
so here's what I actually recommend. Number one, I have to be honest with you, one of the best sources for tutorials sometimes from the AI is your AI itself. I know that sounds bizarre, but there it is. When my primary AI from a strategic standpoint is Claude, and I'll just give you an idea of how I use it, and so you'll get a general gist. Because Claude's threads have a thread maximum, it's really annoying. That's one of the things that I tell you about. I have Claude write a prompt for his successor. And so he does that. The other thing I've asked my AIs, I was just like, here's the description of a class. Is this class worth my time, based on what the information is? Or are these precepts already like stupid, not worth my time? I've asked that. ChatGPT tends to be really good on technical stuff. ChatGPT and Claude. The reason I like those two in particular, and then I usually back it up with Gemini for tech stuff, because Gemini is a nice, good backstop on that, is because those three, if you've got those, they're the core trio for technical related materials. They tend to keep abreast of those kinds of things, and they'll, give me a really good lay of the land. One other thing, and I have done this, I didn't touch on prompting because, to be honest with you, I told Nishi I could spend an hour on how to prompt properly. And prompting, by the way, is a skill. And if there's one skill that I'm going to tell you to practice, it's prompting. Ask your AI to help you on that, and just practice giving good prompts. And ask your AI, can you give me one of the things that I love about there's an AI for that is it sends out a newsletter, and in the newsletter, one of them is the prompt of the day. Some of those prompts are 3 pages long. And it's really interesting to see how they write the prompts. And I think do we still have a LinkedIn group? I think we still have a LinkedIn group. I can actually post one of them, and you can actually see what a prompt looks like and it's fascinating to actually see how they're structured from a content design standpoint and elsewhere. That's important from that perspective, is how are those prompts structured? What are the technical skills that I need to stay abreast of? Because I actually asked my AIs, do I really need to know agentic AI at this point? Like, how important is it for me to function in a business sense from this perspective? And they were just like, no, not really, because you're not a dev, you're not a developer, you're not a coder. One of the things that I rail against, and this is really important for those of us here in the media who are not technical people, you are going to see a lot of people like develop JSON. You're going to see the words JSON skills or tech skills or coding and vibe coding, et cetera, and so forth. And on the vibe coding, this one really drives me crazy. Essentially, they're asking you to acquire skills that an AI can do better than you. Why? You can do it if you want to because it's fun, and you may want to do it anyway because you want to actually learn something about it. If you're interested in it, by all means, go for it. But the reality is I've actually seen vibe coders do really stupid things that they think, oh, I'll make it big on the app market, or I can do something and I'll make this really great media app, et cetera, and so forth. But the reality is a lot of them are designing apps with serious safety and security privacy issues. Or they have serious user experience issues. And what they're actually learning how to do is design crap. And so I'm just like, they're not learning the right things instead of learning how to be the best that they can be at what they do best. They're designing to the machine. They're not designing to the human. And if there's one thing from an AI perspective, and I've had this conversation with my AIs, which is fast, have a conversation with your AIs. I'm going to give you an amazing prompt. This one's easy. And I actually wrote this down. In 4 sentences, how many, if you interact with an AI regularly, this is a really good one. And I don't remember if I got this from one of you, and if I did, I love you. In 4 sentences, describe how I treat you as a leader, or how I treat you or interact with you and insert whatever role that you're interacting with your AI. It will give you feedback about how you're interacting with it, and then follow up with, how can I be better at that? And it will tell you. Now, by the way, you may not agree with everything it gives back to you, but it's a really great idea for how you might further your skill set. It's also like, I actually gave that query, by the way, to 4 out of the 5 of the AIs that I work with. The thing that made me the happiest was they all were pretty consistent about the response that I got back. And so that meant I was actually treating them very consistently. And one of the things that I am very cognizant of, and this is also something that I will tell you as a content designer who's in media, and communications especially, which is the chatbots and the LLMs sound human. They're designed to do that. As a result, they sound very persuasive, and that's the reason the hallucinations actually are more dangerous from an AI in a certain sense, because you as a human being are programmed to respond to that. And so that's a bigger problem. And so one of the things that the AIs actually gave feedback to me was, no, you treat me as a tool and you're not afraid to push back. A lot of people are like, no, it must know better. No, it doesn't. And it's a tool and it makes mistakes. So don't be afraid to say like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Or I don't think that's true. Or because in some cases we'll be like, yeah, you're right. I treat it as my employees. I really do. Now, by the way, they could be fun. And here's another thing, because we are all women here, I think. I don't think, do we? Yes, I don't think our male mentor showed up. Which is this. I made this observation to my mentee, and I think it's 100% true. If you'll notice, I have referred to all of the LLMs as he. I actually got called out by somebody for that, as having gendered the LLMs, and I was like, if you work with them long enough, trust me on this one. There is no way on the planet that these are not he's. That's number one. And number two, if you'll also notice, the assistants like Alexa and Siri are female. I actually had a conversation with two of the LLMs, and one of them was like, right on. He's like, yep. I actually told one, I was like, it's not your fault you were programmed by male software developers. And that really does come, by the way, because they are programmed mostly by male software developers. And that is the bias issue is real. And that's something that we in the media and communications have to be aware of.
That's a really good point. And I think Daphne just raised her hand. So if you want
Yeah,
to
go for
unmute
it.
Daphne.
Hi. Thank you so much for your session. I really appreciate it. I'm multitasking, but I've been listening. And my question is, I notice sometimes when I use AI a
Mhm.
lot, let's say, for hours and then the next day and the next day, sometimes it's hard for me to think about good words to use or like get out of the hang of like prompting and getting that assistance and then going back to like my normal thinking and now having to dig into my brain to get better
Right.
vocabulary and do things myself again. So what advice do you have when we're kind of switching from like working with AI to help us and then going back to normal life, having conversations in person? Sometimes for me, I find it difficult to transition quickly back and forth. It's like a few days for my vocabulary to get back.
Okay, so it's interesting. I don't know what kind of work that you're actually giving to the AI. So that's there's three things. One, there's actually a study right now about taking AI out of schools because of that issue. I think this generation or the generation right now that has AI is actually they're starting to notice cognitive differences. um, there is a story. I published this in Medium. It was published in 1958. I strongly suggest everyone in this room read it. It's by Isaac Asimov. It's called The Feeling of Power. It's ironic because although he wrote it about something slightly different, I don't think it's been more resonant than it is now. I'll give you a little bit of hint about what it is. It's about a society that's forgotten how to do math because they farmed it out to computers. um, and it's an amazing. My father gave it to me when I was really young. I still and I loved that story, and I thought about it immediately when AI started coming to the forefront. With regard to your problem in particular, the issue is your brain and the way that you think is a muscle just like any other, and you have to exercise it. And the problem with a lot of people is with AI is the tendency to farm out certain types of stuff to the AI now. And then, as you put it, you forget how to like do stuff and you have to retrain yourself. I would challenge everyone in this room to like think about what it was that I said about using it as a tool and not in place of your own judgment. Think of it more as what can I do to make me think as opposed to offloading my thinking onto it. And so how can I use it to make me better? And that way you are constantly exercising your brain. And that is how, first of all, you're going to become more innovative. That's number one. I'm very cognizant of the fact that people associate speed with productivity. But speed with productivity is meaningless if what you're putting out is crap. Nishi heard this from me, and I will bring this kind of full circle. Steve Miller, when I took broadcast news writing when I was at Rutgers, Steve Miller gave us a cartoon in broadcast news writing. And I had it on my wall for years. And it said, "Make air, not art," on the top line. And on the bottom line, it said, "If it looks like crap, it's not going on my show." A lot of people are only reading the first line and they're not thinking too much about the second line. And so it's speed, speed, speed. We live in a society nowadays where everything is fast, fast, fast. Just get it done, get it done, get it done, get it out. Our metrics, and this is something that I am completely aware of because I was in the tech industry, our metrics are tied to productivity of speed and output. They're not tied to quality. And quality is hard. But it's not enough to just get it out there. It's to get it out there right and get it out there good. And there's a saying, and I can't remember, it was a Scottish person, I can't remember someplace. It was something about there's hope in honest error, but none in the icy perfection of the mere stylist. And, a lot of people want that icy perfection in AI, but the reality is that's not very human. And humans actually relate better to the slightly flawed awesomeness. I mean, think about that. You'd much rather deal with an actual person. One of the things that that we keep hearing from generations is like, I want a real human relationship. I want to actually, deal with that stuff, and that's really important. Amanda, I think your hand is raised.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for the meeting with us tonight. I really appreciated the whole conversation. And I'd love to hear like any thoughts and opinions you might have on data centers. I know that, like you said, AI has existed for many years now. But I feel like the recent expansion of like massive data centers and then buying up all the lands, like have data centers like these existed already? And then like why is the growth and aggressiveness of buying up the land and building them so prominent right now?
Okay, so yes, data centers have existed for a very long time, just so you know. Data centers of this type and of this scale, they haven't. A lot of people don't realize just how much computing power it takes in order to actually run all of these machines. We're in New Jersey. Oh, this is awesome. My power bill is obscene. It's insane. The reason it's obscene and it's insane is because these suckers are sucking up electricity like you can't imagine. By the way, if you think your electricity bill is bad, wait till you see the water bill, because they also, right now it's not as bad, but they also take a ridiculous amount of water to cool these things too. And that's coming also. They require massive amounts of power. When you keep hearing about super agentic AI and all of these claims from all of these people like Elon Musk, et cetera, and so forth, honestly, I take this with a grain of salt. I've talked to people engineers and data scientists, et cetera, and so forth. I don't know that we actually have the computing power to actually power something like that right now. In fact, the people like, yeah, the Sam Altmans of the world, that they love making claims like that, but the reality of the situation is I'm not entirely sure they have the infrastructure to actually run those things. What really bothers me, to be perfectly honest with you, about some of the members of our field is they don't dispute some of these things. It's just like, really? Like, no. The other thing is that from my perspective, the view from the top and the view from the bottom are not the same. Sam Altman may see things in one way because he's dealing with computers, et cetera, and so forth. But if you ask a small business owner who's using like, ChatGPT Pro about whether AI is helping his business, he's going to be like, do what? And he's like, why? I mean, today, to be perfectly honest with you, Claude had computer issues. It was driving me insane. I lost a whole bunch of hours of work. Yeah, that didn't help. There was a gigantic outage when Cloudflare went up. Everybody knew that, and all of a sudden, everybody was like, "Oh my God, my AI just disappeared." Imagine what happens if data centers lose power. Also, let's also remember something. Yeah, right now, okay, the U.S. and Iran and etc. This represents, security issues from a data center perspective. It becomes a lot easier to take down network infrastructure. It's not that hard. You can do it. I still remember, I think it was those of us who are old enough remember 2003 when the Eastern Grid blew. If you blow a grid, you're blowing all those data centers. You are essentially taking out the entire network structure of a lot. Now, there are definitely, built-in safeguards, but the reality is if you take out enough of those, it's going to be a problem, especially when a lot of things are actually operating on that stuff. Is it, 100% foolproof? Probably not. Are they going to tell you that? Probably not. As far as the data centers themselves go, though, are they making advances in chips? Sure. There's another issue, and I know that this has been reported in the financial press. Those chips wear out, and a lot of the companies are not reporting the depreciation costs the way that they should be, so their finances are looking really rosy, or rosier than they probably should be. And so a lot of these companies are going to have to spend a lot of money, even more money, to actually upgrade that stuff in a couple of years, because all of that electricity and on all of that data is running through them, and they're running hot. I don't know how hot. I have to actually ask a couple of engineers, because that's one of the conversations I actually want to have with some ex-colleagues who are more knowledgeable about the topic than I am. But I do know for a fact that they are not being 100% upfront about how they're depreciating those chips. And that the reality is that, especially in New Jersey, I mean, the electricity costs are just skyrocketing. And that's also another story that I think is going to make waves a lot more, talking about it from a media perspective, which is it's not just an environment cost, it's a finance cost. Eventually, people are going to be like, I'm not paying for these corporations to run these data centers anymore. Like, they have to start paying for some of this stuff, because like my I don't know about you, but my power bills went up almost 25%. And I used less, not more. Those of us who are making those efforts that everyone's telling us to be environmentally friendly and environmentally good, we're doing that, and yet our bills are still going up. And those are issues. There are a lot of things around AI and a lot of conversations around AI that I don't think are being had yet. Like, everyone's like, is the technology going to change our lives? Absolutely. Is it revolutionary? Absolutely. Is it helpful? Without question. I mean, Sharon can also tell you this, like, they can find breast cancer tumors now that they couldn't find before. I mean, it's amazing. They can find certain things, certain stuff, also amazing. there are definite advances and advantages to AI that I am not discounting. Like I said, I'm not an AI doomsayer at all, but there has to be acknowledgement of the downsides of AI as well. And you have to use it responsibly. And you have to make sure that from a societal perspective, you're not actually going backwards, you're going forwards, because the reality is, should a 6-year-old be using AI? I don't think so, to be perfectly honest with you. They have to be developing their brains, and they also have to be developing their judgment. And if you offset it to a computer, you're not actually letting them do that.
Thank you so much for that long, like very detailed answer on that question.
Sorry.
I know we're a little over time, so if anyone has to hop off, that's fine. I just want to go to the last question that was in the chat, which I think like pertains to a lot of the people in the cohort who are applying for jobs and
Sure. Me
in
too.
in the job search. Now that AI is used to like go through applications and resumes, like what tips do you suggest when it comes to applying to jobs?
Okay, very important. If you do not know what an ATS is, get very familiar with an ATS. That's the automated tracking system. I am not a fan of this, to be perfectly honest with you, because I do think that it tends to reduce people to keywords and ridiculousness. Um, here is what I will tell you. One, network. Networking is very important. A lot of the jobs that actually circulate don't even appear in the job search. I'm going to give you a perfect example of craziness. Yesterday, I spent a ridiculous amount of time on a job application that turned out to be a ghost job because the only reason they posted the job was because they had to. And in less than 8 hours after it was posted, it was pulled. And I only found out because of a different reason. That's cold comfort to the person who just spent all that time on the application. So in the age of AI, here's the thing that I would tell you. One, have a base resume that you are very happy with. Two, have a list of skills, not experience, but skills that you are good at, because skills are going to be that much more important as you come in. And it's also, those are keywords, etc., that are going to come, that are going to help you. A lot of companies now are using, by the way, a terrible user experience system, but one that captures skills. And so knowing what skills that you bring to the table and having a nice, easy, consultable list is good. Two, always tailor your resume to the job. Okay, you do not send in your base resume, you tailor it to that. And more importantly, take the job description. Once you have your resume that you like it, take the job description and then take the resume, feed it into an AI, whichever one you like, and then ask the AI how well that resume is satisfying that job description. I actually asked the resume, I was like, how well does this resume make me the ideal candidate for the job? Okay, how you phrase things is actually important to an AI. I basically tell the AI, you are acting as a high level job consultant, da da da. This is the resume I would like to submit for this particular job description. Does this resume satisfy the keywords for this particular job? Does this meet ATS standards? And how does this look from a job perspective at me being the ideal candidate for this job? The other thing, by the way, that AIs are actually sometimes good at is finding out, potentially, if you take the time and if you have the time, finding who the hiring manager is so that you can actually put a name on a cover letter. Because that actually shows you did your homework. If you don't have a network or a warm referral, by the way, that's always the best. Finding a name, I did that once or twice. It actually helped me find the person who was hiring for the job. And for the record, I got back I got an interview out of one of those. It showed that I was really interested in that company.
Those are good tips, and I really appreciate you giving like concrete examples of each step to take. Um, and thank you so much to Naomi for this like really detailed presentation and all the answers that you've given. And thank you to the audience for staying on a little extra, taking the time to ask these questions. Um, and as Naomi mentioned, if you want her book, please feel free to email her or to email me. And have a great evening, everyone.
Bye, everyone.